Go. All right, I think we'll get underway. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome again to the Lubar Center at Marquette University Law School, Eckstein Hall. I'm Mike Goucher, and this is On the Issues. This is our continuing series of conversations with news and policymakers, people we like to say are doing interesting and important work in this region and beyond. Today, we are joined by Kelli Thompson. She is the Wisconsin State Public Defender. Won't you please welcome her to Marquette University Law School?
Thank you.
Kelli Thompson is a Marquette Law School alum, and so I thought we might begin by taking you back to your years as a law school student. When you were a 3L, for instance, how did you decide that this was the work you were going to do?
Well, first of all, I was not in this beautiful building. We were over at Sensenbrenner Hall then, in the basement, oftentimes. But so even going a little bit further
Sure.
back, my father practiced law, and I would take time and go with him over to watch court hearings in very, very rural Wisconsin. I'd always kind of found that fascinating. As I grew up and went through undergrad, I really, at that point in time, really did not decide to go to law school until pretty late. I was working already and decided that maybe law school would be a good avenue based on discussions with my family. Again, I really hadn't thought about a courtroom aspect to my legal career. And in fact, I probably did a very, very good job of staying far, far away from any type of trial advocacy or litigation type class. And I think my thought was I would get the JD behind my name and then just do something else. The something else, I have no idea what that was going to be, but at that point in time, I just was not sure. In my third year of law school, I think it was killing my father that I was not even considering going into a courtroom.
I should say, I'm sure everybody in this room, almost everybody knows who your father is, but Tommy G. Thompson, the former governor,
That is
the former
true. That is
Secretary of
true.
Health and Human Services. Yeah. Oh, see, some people
Apparently
didn't know.
people did not know. There you go.
Okay, all right.
So at that point in time, he certainly wasn't pushy, but he said, I think before you decide that you hate it, you at least have to try it. If you don't like it, that's fine, but at least try it and make that decision. So, and he said Marquette has wonderful clinical programs. I mean, they have
Absolutely.
terrific outreach into the community. You can do so many different things, so just pick one. I said, okay, you pick for me because I don't know what I want to do. He goes, well, you could be a prosecutor clinic, you could work with the judges in an internship type program, or the public defender's office. And I was like, okay, you pick. And he's like, there's no doubt, public defender. He's like, you should go there. And I would say, quite honestly, after my first couple of days, I was hooked. That's all I wanted to do.
Why did your dad say that? No doubt you should be a public defender.
I think he recognized that being a public defender was the right role in the kind of work that I had done and the kind of person that I was. I loved to be with people. I think he thought I would share in with them the stories and hardships and difficulties that they were struggling with. He did, because of Elroy and where we were from, he did a different practice, all types of law, but also criminal defense. And I would watch the way that he worked and talked with people, and he was always very much about, especially if you come from less, you should expect more from the law. And I think he said you could follow in those footsteps and really provide that to individuals who need it. And I think he saw that would be the right role for me. Again, I had no idea. But being his daughter, and I think him watching me grow up, he thought this was absolutely the right job for me. And I was checking a box. I was like, I'll check the box and be done, and then go on to who knows what. And it was it. That was it for me.
Couple days you knew it.
Couple of days. I had terrific leaders, mentors in that office. Some that are still in the office today. Paige Styler, Kim Heller-Murata. I was with a cohort of individuals that just were fantastic people and fantastic lawyers, and I got to sit next to them. And I got to listen to what they were doing, and I got to watch them advocate for these individuals that were sitting next to them and talk about the difficulties and struggles that they were going through, and this was it. This was all I ever wanted to do.
What was it that you liked best about the job? The job is, I guess, part advocate, part storyteller. I mean, there's a lot to it. What did you like best about it?
The human side. I got to be with people every single day. So oftentimes in their most difficult times in their lives. So obviously by definition, if you're being represented by the public defender's office, you are poor. So poverty was a significant issue. But people had so many other, they oftentimes were in crisis. These were individuals that had mental health issues, educational obstacles, drug and alcohol issues. Sometimes they were just people that provided two paths. They took one that was not the right path, and they needed help, they needed advocacy, they needed good litigation skills, and we would not see them again. But oftentimes these were people that their whole lives were in crisis, and you got to be the first person to really listen to them, to talk to them, to hear their story, and sometimes tell their story. And to me, it was a privilege. I never walked out thinking this isn't, I was frustrated oftentimes, and it was, I would walk out some days saying I never want to do this again, but it was an honor. I got to tell their story, tell individual stories.
As a public defender, as an attorney, you don't have to like your client, but I was struck by a story I read about you, a really good story in the Journal-Sentinel a couple of years about you, and you said that, you represented hundreds, thousands of clients, hundreds or thousands, I'm trying to, not hundreds of thousands, but I didn't want that to come out wrong. But that in 98% of the cases, you liked them.
I did. I didn't necessarily like what they were accused of or what they ended up, if they ended up pleading guilty or being found guilty of, but I liked them as people. And I recognize just how human they are. We sometimes forget they're those people. Those people are someone's mother, someone's father, someone's sister, someone's brother, someone's child. They are our community members. And I've often said I couldn't live their lives. We've gotten smarter in the criminal justice system talking about who these individuals are, but these are people that oftentimes have had so much trauma in their lives. They have had so much hardship. They survive. They're not living, they're surviving. And you get to know these people. Oftentimes, and me especially, as you'll see, I talk too much, but you learn just to sit back and instead of saying, well, you should be doing this and this and this, and I see this and this, just to sit back and listen. Take a deep breath and listen to their story, and you learn so much about who they are or who they want to be or what they were hoping to be. And that is a real, it was, to me it was touching, but it was really, I saw the human side of them. I mean, some of them were so angry and they were so frustrated and they've been so beaten down by the system. And yet, just taking a few minutes or sometimes many hours or sometimes many days talking to them, you just realized what kind of individuals they were. And I honestly liked 98+% of my clients. Very few that I could say, I could work with them, I could advocate for them, I could litigate for them, but I maybe didn't like them as people.
You spent 5 or 6 years with the Public Defender's Office, and I read you stepped away briefly, only to return later. Why did you step away? Why did you come back?
I stepped away because in the Public Defender's Office, based on our workload and the kind of work that we do, it can be crushing, exhausting. If any law students are coming to be public defenders, it's still fantastic work. Wonderful, most rewarding work ever. But you're working 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. I was out of law school. I was young. I could live in the office. I could be there at nights and weekends. I got married, and he knew what he was getting into, but then we decided to start a family, and I wasn't really sure how I could balance. I think, how do I take the baby to court with me and into the jail with me and do all of this type of work? And I didn't realize, and people do it every single day. But I thought that might be the time for me to try something different. And so I did step away, and I did some very interesting work, but it didn't speak to me in the same way. And when the opportunity came back to rejoin the Public Defender's Office, I jumped at it. And then went on to have 2 more children, and we figured it out along the way.
So you became the state public defender, 2011?
2011.
2011. So I thought it might be helpful to get a sense of just what a big job this is. You talked about the crushing workload. And I guess I was naive, like maybe some of us in this room. I had no idea how many cases the Public Defender's Office handles in a year. How many cases is it?
It ranges. In the last few years, it's stayed right around about 138,000, but it's 138 to 145,000 cases a year statewide. We have about any given day, and again with retention issues, always an issue for us, but we could have as many as 375 public defenders representing in those cases. And then in our conflict and overflow cases, we contract with private attorneys, attorneys that have fantastic skills and are willing to take our cases. We have about 40 offices statewide, but we represent in all 72 counties. So we are a statewide public defense system.
What is the big challenge? And maybe we can break this into two parts. Sure. The biggest challenge for the office, is it the workload? Is it the number of attorneys you have to handle the workload? Is it keeping good people on staff?
Yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah.
So we are really fortunate in the Public Defender's Office. We get just some fantastic people coming to work for our agency. We have people that started their careers and will retire with the Public Defender's Office and just are wonderful individuals. The applications and resumes we see are wonderful.
So the quality of the candidate.
The quality is fantastic, fantastic. But retention is an issue because we're asking them to take on significant workload and balance that. And on top of that, oftentimes they are not able to, as I have mentioned in the past, they, like to do things like pay their student loans and maybe pay electric bills and start a family. And that's a hard thing to do sometimes if the pay is not increasing. So retention, we're thrilled in Wisconsin. Our economy is great, but I lose a lot of attorneys because of the great economy, because they want to, and they will tell you they love this work. The work is wonderful. They are committed to the mission of the agency, but again, that balance and the workload is really significant. So that's a real issue for us. And then in certain parts of the state, we are seeing, and this is something I know Marquette is working on, the University of Wisconsin-Madison's working on, the State Bar is working on, we're working on, is in rural parts of Wisconsin just finding attorneys to stay in our offices is a significant issue.
I'm wondering in terms of salary, give people an idea, average salary for somebody who works in your office as an attorney.
Well, so starting salary, and it's the same as the prosecutors. So you start out at $49,000, which is a good starting salary. I mean, this is, but the salary doesn't necessarily, and hadn't for many years, really moved up. So we were seeing this huge pancake between people who've been there the 7 to 11 years and really not moving up. A few years ago, the legislature was very good to us and included something called merit pay for public defenders and prosecutors. And it's important to know, public defenders and prosecutors, we've all been paid at the same since the early 90s. I mean, this was something that, it was called pay parity, and it was really, really important because no side should be the training ground for the other side. We didn't want people hopping back and forth because the criminal justice system, it becomes inefficient, ineffective, and just doesn't work well. So this is something that, if nothing else, we could work really closely together on this issue. This should continue, pay parity. In the last budget, unfortunately, it got a little sideways, and so public defenders received 20 cents on the DA dollar, essentially. So we did not receive the parity that they received. And so we are working, that's a big issue, it's a critical issue for me. And so we're working really closely with the legislature, who's working very closely on this and trying to fix that, because again, if I'm a public defender and you say, hey, Kelli, come on over to the DA's office, you can make a little bit more money, that's a conflict of interest. I have to leave that day. That's hundreds of cases and hundreds of clients that will not have a representation that day, which is significant. So, for instance, the DAs, the prosecutors, they're all very supportive of our pay progression. This is something we are in lockstep with, which is really important because, again, that it's important for our criminal justice to have that it's well-funded on both sides so that we have a strong criminal justice system.
So it is a real concern that you could
Critical.
lose people who
Absolutely.
are of a mind where they want to do public service. Mm-hmm. You're concerned that they might just say, the prosecutor's office is just a better financial decision?
It's already happening. And it's the letter of, I'm so sorry, I wanted to be with you forever, I wanted to stay in this agency, but I can't, I can make more money, and so I need to leave. And so it's critical. And so we're working very closely with the legislature and the governor's office on this issue.
I think you said it well. I mean, $49,000 is certainly not a bad starting salary, but if you have a family, if you have kids, you said some of your staff people they take on additional jobs, even though they face this really intense work schedule.
Absolutely. So, and that's really a struggle. So we have individuals who have paper routes in the morning.
Public defenders.
Public defenders, the attorneys. We have they work in stores or in restaurants on the weekends. And the issue we have, which is a significant issue, is we have to be very careful on what we approve, because being a public defender is not a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 5 job. It is 50, 60, 70 hours. You have cases that are set for trial. You have to be working weekends. And so we have to be very, very, very tight on what we're allowed or what we're able to approve for those outside employment. So it's really a significant issue for staff who are just trying to make ends meet.
Let's talk about the other part of the equation. You mentioned that there are, obviously, to meet the need that exists out there, there are times where the public defender needs to appoint a private attorney. For years, private attorneys who did this kind of work were compensated the same. I mean, since 1995,
Yes.
They got $40 an hour in 1995, and they're still, as of this moment, getting $40 an hour.
That is correct.
The legislature has now bumped that to 70. At least it will start on January of 2020.
Yes.
Is that going to make a difference? Because I would think that an awful lot of private attorneys are just saying, I can't do this. I'd love to help you, but it doesn't make sense for me.
I think it will.
Make a difference.
I think it will make a difference. And it was a significant show, I think, of support from, obviously from the legislature and from the governor's office. It was in the governor's budget. The joint finance legislature passed this very quickly. But it was also a big show of support from others in the criminal justice system, which I think was really significant. We had judges that were speaking on this issue. We had prosecutors, obviously the public defender's office. We had law enforcement. I mean, everybody saying this is a critical need. While there are many that wish that it was more money, I think going from that 40 to 70 will be pretty significant for a lot of people. And there are people who, they've done our work, they'll continue to do it because, again, they feel it's what they need to do. It's important to them. But for a lot of people stepped away saying it's not just the money. It was the fact that for how many years now, 20-some years, it just never went up. It was almost like you don't appreciate the work that I do. So I think that $70 will be a significant impact on us being able to retain and then bring other attorneys back. At least I'm hoping so. But, we'll continue to work with the legislature so this isn't the last raise that they see in the private bar rate. But I think it's significant. Our issue is just, again, it's in rural Wisconsin. We just have so few attorneys. You have your public defender, you have your prosecutor, you have your judge, maybe corp counsel or a law firm doing the corp counsel work. And there are just so few attorneys in some of those areas that we need law students to go up and see beautiful northern Wisconsin. Beautiful,
Especially this time of year.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's gorgeous. And you become a big fish in a small pond very quickly. People are so excited to see you. But it's really, that's a priority, is to get individuals to go to other parts of the state.
There have been some who have said that the situation before the bump in pay per hour had reached the crisis stage.
Absolutely.
You agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a crisis. Mm-hmm. And, we've really been fortunate in Wisconsin that we've had a strong public defender system that has never been, for decades and decades and decades. I mean, everybody has, whether intentionally or unintentionally, said this is important to have a strong public defense system. But having that private bar rate so low, and now the parity issue, we're seeing chinks in it that we have to fix, and I think people recognize that. We've had people sitting in custody on conflict cases. Literally, we were making hundreds of calls to get one attorney to come take a case, and not, before it used to be the really serious cases, but these were what I would consider more of the run-of-the-mill cases. We were up in Bayfield calling Kenosha, begging an attorney to come up there. to take a conflict case that we couldn't keep in our office because of that conflict. And so it absolutely a crisis. And again, I think, I'm talking about it, I'm, jumping up and down and yelling about it. I think it was the fact that others were saying, this is a crisis. People should not be sitting in custody without representation because we can't find an attorney to take this case.
Well, there's about the right to a speedy trial.
Exactly.
And you've got, folks who are waiting.
Well, and we have people are waiting, and we're taking individuals who are presumed innocent, if we believe in the innocent until proven guilty, sitting in custody just waiting for their day in court, and that it throws their entire life upside down when we do that. So it was critical, it is critical, and the fact that it's changing January 1st, 2020 is significant.
Talking about people sitting in custody, I'll spend a couple moments on the notion of cash bail and the impact of cash bail. What is your take on that? Do we need to take another look at what we use bail for and the impact that it has on people's lives?
Yes, we do, and other states are doing it. In Wisconsin, we've had special legislative committees, so it's a conversation that has started. In places like Milwaukee, they're doing a lot of work on that front end, on the bail side. But cash bail keeps poor people in custody, again, waiting for their day in court. We know that research and data shows us that if we take people out of their community, people certainly that are struggling out of their community, even for 48 hours, we've completely unsettled their lives. We've destabilized them. If we take them out for those few days and then down the road put them back in this flux, we've not made our communities safer. We've made them less safe, and we know this. So taking people, picking them out because they've been arrested and keeping them on this low cash bail. We have people sitting for months on $100 cash bail. They're away from their families, they're away from their jobs, they're away from their homes. This is a significant issue, and it's but for the fact that they're poor. Cash bail is set for flight. It's a flight risk. If you're not likely to come back to court, it's not because we don't like you or because you're poor or because we think you're not safe. We use it as a safety. We think you're kind of dangerous. There's a presumption of innocence there, and other states are doing it. Other states, New Jersey's done it. They've kind of have been the newest. Texas is looking at it, and Wisconsin is. So this is good because we have so many people sitting pre-trial statewide just waiting for that day. And my fear is, and I think we already know this, is that people make decisions based on just that quick, I need to get out of custody, rather than the long term, is this the right decision to make?
Is there any evidence to suggest that people who spend time in custody while they wait for their cases to go to trial, that it increases the likelihood that they commit a crime or a criminal offense?
So say that one more time.
So is there, I've read, I think, reports that suggest that if people are sitting in custody waiting to go to trial, that in fact, if you look at that over time, they're more likely to commit a crime.
Because we've destabilized them. We've sent them into, again, we've taken them out of whatever structure that they've had, especially, my clientele, my individuals who we again know have significant issues oftentimes, and poverty being one of them. We've taken them out of their whatever community that they have, whatever existence that they're living. We've taken them out into custody now for a few days. Very quickly they lose their jobs. Their kids are where? The apartment that they may have had or the people that they were staying with are gone. They don't have that anymore. So we've left them, now they're coming out of custody, still again in that pretrial stage. And we know that we've oftentimes taken options away from them. And that it does lead to more crime, there's no doubt.
What's your response to citizens who say, yeah, I hear you, but we need to feel safe? And some of these folks are accused of things that, in some cases may not be the most serious felony, but it may be something that does impact a victim's life in a pretty serious way. We have to be very careful in terms of looking at the bail issue.
Absolutely, and public safety is obviously a significant issue that people look at. But what research is telling us, we're doing the exact opposite. We're not making our community safer by taking them into custody, providing them with resources, providing them with support while they're waiting for their day in court. That's more likely to keep us safe. There are certain states that there is a risk part of that where it's not a cash bail, it's a retention. Basically, we're going to retain you in custody based on the seriousness of your offense. It's not a bail system anymore, a cash bail system. But we have other resources. Not all counties have the same resources, but what we call a lot of, like in Milwaukee, we're lucky, Justice Point, pretrial. I mean, are these people that are committing crimes because of mental health issues? So is this something that someone just needs to have medication? What have we done to the person that has mental health issues, maybe getting their medications, we take them in custody, and now we've completely destabilized them? I mean...
You say the mental health part is a crisis.
Oh, it is absolutely a crisis, absolutely. And we're getting better, but we treat a lot of our mentally ill individuals in the criminal justice system. I mean, we've often said that the prisons are the largest mental health hospitals. I mean, are we doing justice by them? We want to solve problems, but we're trying to solve them all in the criminal justice system, and that is about the most inefficient and ineffective way to solve most of these issues, whether it's healthcare, mental health. We throw everything in there and say, okay, well, now fix it, and we're not equipped. The criminal justice system is not equipped. That's not what it was intended to do. And we're now trying to come out of the system, I think, or working backwards almost to say what kind of support do we need and what kind of structures do we need to put in place so we don't have this going on.
I want to get your take on the incarceration rates here in Wisconsin. We've got, I don't know, roughly 24,000 people in prison right now. That is twice as many as are in prisons in the state of Minnesota, which has a similar population and a similar rate of crime. How would you describe what's happening in terms of incarceration in the state of Wisconsin?
It's interesting because by all stats, our crime rates are going down, and our prison population is going up, so we obviously have to look at what's going on there and who we're putting in the jails and in the prison. You know, we talk about the prison population. We're not even talking about the jail population of all the significant individuals that are sitting in either pretrial or being sentenced in the jail, so that's another huge population. But, you know, I think there are a number of factors. Again, I think it comes back to trying to solve too many issues in the criminal justice system. I think that's a big issue. But I think it's who we have in the prison. It's also the way that a lot of our sentencings are structured. We tend to put people in prison for longer periods of time now. And then we put people out on what used to be considered like probation, extended probation, extended supervision. Those extended supervision lengths of time are very, very long. And so once you're in that system, it's really hard to get out of. You could be doing great you could have an extended supervision period of time for 7 years. You could be doing great for 6 years. You have a bump in the road and you're going back for that full length of time. Or you're going back for part of it and then you're back out on extended supervision and back out and back out. Those are significant issues. We have people coming out of custody, reentering our communities, and again, that support network, have we done enough there? Again, and it's a financial issue that is significant, but the collateral consequences, we have hundreds and hundreds of collateral consequences that impact people when they come out of custody. It impacts if they would like to go into the military, their educational opportunities, their job, who, what, and where they can work, where they can live. And a lot of them I think were unintended, but one of the studies done that Wisconsin had 700 collateral consequences for misdemeanor and felony convictions. I mean, so we've set up these obstacles. Again, I think oftentimes unintended, but people are sentenced for life. And how do you come out of that? I think it begs the question. We need a lot of work to be done on if we really want people to succeed. I think we have to decide what we want. And if we want people, I want people to succeed. I don't want people going in. But if they're in, I certainly don't want them coming back and doing the rotating door. I want them out and being provided that success, that path to success.
Would framing this as a workforce of tomorrow issue
Absolutely.
Be helpful in terms of addressing this and building support for changes?
And I think, criminal justice reform is getting talked about in all areas, but we are definitely seen in the workforce area. There's no doubt about that. Wisconsin has an low unemployment rate. We are an older state. We know that. We have a lot of our young people coming out of the colleges and technical schools that are not necessarily staying in Wisconsin. And so we're looking for this workforce. This workforce is sitting in custody, either in the jails or in the prisons. And I think it's bringing the business community together to say, what can we do? We need these individuals to succeed. If we want employees and we want to even increase our business, expand, we need workers. And these workers are individuals that need to be able to come in and do the job. And so we need to give them the tools. And oftentimes those tools can be started while they're incarcerated and then continue while they're out, but also it's that support out of custody as well.
So in terms of criminal justice reform initiatives, are there things that you feel particularly strongly about, things you think maybe the state of Wisconsin should be looking at in order to address the incarceration issue?
I think it's from the beginning to the end. So, I've talked now multiple times about the public defender system and how important it is to have such a strong public defense system. You need that advocacy up front. We need to make sure that people are getting that representation, that strong representation from the front, and they're getting that, and that's really important. We need to take a deep breath on bail. We don't need people sitting pretrial. Most people should be out of custody awaiting for their day in trial, and they're making decisions that are impacting them. I would love to say that if I'm charged with a crime that I would hold out and I would wait for my day to just prove that I didn't do it. If I have 3 kids sitting at home, I'm going to make a different decision if I'm sitting in custody waiting for my day for the next 2 or 3 months. That impacts them forever, and it impacts their family. So it starts with pretrial. It's while they are in custody, if they have to be in custody. I think we're so afraid. We keep thinking longer, tougher means we're safer. We're not safer. We're not making our communities safer. I think if we continue to try to treat mental, and again, I think people are working on this, so I'm not saying this isn't being done, but especially with mental health issues and alcohol and drug issues, the healthcare issues, if we're going to try and fix these in the criminal justice system, we're not going to fix them. We're not going to fix them. And then I think coming out, the re-entry part, we have to take a deep breath and say, okay, you've done the time that a society or the judge or whomever decided was the appropriate amount of time. Now we need to give you, we need you a path forward. And I think I think people oftentimes believe that's what should happen, but with the collateral consequences, it's not happening.
It's interesting, the politics, I think it can be said pretty safely, are changing on this issue. I have to ask you about your dad, who was here probably about a year ago. He had his new book out, and one of the things he wrote about in his book was his change of heart on putting people in prison. And he said, in this room, he said, I'm sorry, we put too many people in prison, and I regret that. How much influence did you have on your dad's new way of thinking? I'd love to sit into one of those Thompson family discussions and hear what's being said.
When my sister brother, like, oh, here she goes again. We have had very lively discussions over the years, and I would like to think that I've had some influence on his change of heart in a lot of ways. But he was governor. He made decisions based on the information that he had, the people that were around him. And I've talked about this. He was very, very active and proactive in healthcare, and still is in healthcare issues. And we seem not to have a problem in the healthcare field. We get new research, we go in different directions. We try something, and if it's not working, we put funding here and we try something different. My mother, my sister, myself, we've all had breast cancer. It was all treated differently because we all had it at different times. And it never seemed that strange because the new research would say this is what you do, the experts would say this is what you do. Criminal justice system, we're slow on the uptake on that. We're getting better. We're using a lot of research and a lot of evidence-based decision making on this. But criminal justice is one where we shot from the hip a lot more. Like we just think, we think if we just tamp down on you, you're gonna do better. We've gotten smarter, and I think he has been able to see the research and the healthcare. We're talking a lot more about trauma-informed care. I mean, we know what happens to children in their homes and in their communities when they're little will impact them as adults. It's common sense, but we haven't until the last few years really talked about that in the criminal justice system. That impacts the decisions that they're making. So I think he has been able to see, and again, it's exactly what you talked about. Oftentimes it's workforce. If the same people are rotating back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we can't help them to get out of the system, then we're not, at some point in time, we're not doing something right. We can place the blame on them constantly, or we can look internally and say, we're not doing something right here.
Mm-hmm. One of the arguments you hear, some of the pushback on this is that, well, the crime went down, when we instituted a lot of these get tough on crime legislative moves, late 80s, early 90s, we were in the midst of the crack epidemic. Mm-hmm. We had a lot of serious crime. In a town like Milwaukee, homicides were twice what they are right now. Hard for people to believe, but they were. And that it worked. It diminished crime. But what I hear you saying is crime is going down right now, and we're still behaving in the same way as we did then.
And we can put everybody in prison forever. I mean, that can be our option. If that's what we want to do, if we, we want to give everyone the rocket ride and say, this is it, we can do that. That can be a policy decision. We can't afford it. We'll decimate families. And I think we're looking at, we look at the criminal justice system, but look at the poverty that we're seeing. Look at the healthcare issues that we're seeing in parts of Milwaukee. Is there a connection to the criminal justice system and what policies that have happened in 10, 20 years ago? I mean, I'm not an expert and I'm not a researcher, but my guess, based on what I'm reading, that's a possibility. You had Professor Butler here a couple of weeks ago, and he was fascinating. Do we feel good that 50% of the African American men in Wisconsin at the ages of 30 or 40 have been in jail at some point in time? I mean, is that a stat where, I mean, that's horrifying to me. And when we take those people out of their homes, we're impacting their children. So it's not just about what's happening to that person. That person's one person. It's their wife or their significant other or their children, and then it's their community, and we can see what's happening. So it's not just about that one policy impacting that one person. We have to think long term, and I think what we're seeing, and again, this isn't a blame game. This is everybody coming to the table recognizing this is the information we have today. So let's work for today. I think people sometimes, especially in the criminal justice system, they all go to their corners and say, it's not my fault. I mean, I'm not that. I didn't do that. Rather than just say, you know what? This is where we're at. Are we satisfied with having 23,500 people in a prison system? Are we satisfied that we have people leaving the state because we've made it so difficult for them to find jobs? Are we satisfied that we're trying to figure out programs so that their children in our communities can see their moms and dads in prison? Are we satisfied that the same people are going back and back and back, oftentimes for the same original crime? Are we satisfied that people, once they've done whatever we thought that they should be doing with their, incarceration or punishment, they can't find a job, they can't find housing? I mean, is this what we're satisfied with? I think not. I don't think this is what we should be satisfied with. I think we can always do better, and that comes back to, taking a lot of these issues out of the criminal justice system, but while they're here, we have to focus on them, and we have to be okay with focusing on them.
When I listen to you, you can hear the passion, you can feel it. There are different ways to effectuate change. One of them is by doing the work you're doing today. Another one is by doing the work that your dad did, by running for office. Why did you decide that was not in your future? Or is it in your future?
Well, because I'm just pretending my dad is behind me. Never say never. But I don't see myself running for office. Running for office is hard. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, what political spectrum you're part of. It is hard for everybody, and it's hard on the family. I lived through that for many years. And I really give a lot of people credit, because in any given policy, in any given day, half the people don't agree with you, and that's a hard thing to do. My path, I feel, is what I'm doing in the criminal justice system as a public defender. That's the path that I am. You have to be passionate about it. I just don't see myself running for office. Not that I don't know where all the legislators are and I have to bug them all of the time, but I see myself, I like the advocacy role I have for my clients and people that I don't feel have a voice, and are oftentimes marginalized and oftentimes, demonized in the media and in other aspects. I get to have that voice, and I feel privileged to have it. So that's a very long answer. Is I don't think you're going to see any posters with me running for office anytime soon.
I do have to ask, so do you feel, how is morale in the public defender's office because of some of what you just described?
You know, they're fighters. They are fighting every single day. These are people that they're not expecting a slap on the back and, hey, you did a great job. These are people, we had one attorney, I just got an email, she had 4 trials in 11 days. I mean, these are, and winning. I mean, these are people that are fighting for justice. These are people that will sit across from a prosecutor to talk about a client and really humanize that client. These are people that are being yelled at and screamed at and spit on in the jails and prisons because of the issues that clients have and the frustration that they have. But they're fighters and they really believe in the mission. So morale, I mean, I hope they feel like I'm fighting for them up at the Capitol and with policymakers and legislators. Public defenders in Wisconsin, we're fortunate as an agency because we sit at the table with judges, we sit at the table with prosecutors, we sit at the table with criminal justice experts to talk about reforms in the system and what we can do. We have things called criminal justice coordinating councils where public defenders are at the table, oftentimes setting the table, oftentimes introducing the discussions. That does not happen in every state. I have the privilege of going to a lot of national groups and national committees, and it's amazing. There's oftentimes no conversations had. You know, they're happening in the media where everyone's pointing fingers rather than just sitting down and talking. And wow, how wonderful Wisconsin has that. We have that. We have a system where if, you know, John Chisholm is here and Judge Donald is here, we can have a discussion, a really thorough, good discussion on what we want to see broadly. And that doesn't happen everywhere. So I think public defenders recognize that in Wisconsin. Day to day, there's frustration, of course.
Sure.
I think probably one of it's again, and I can't speak for all of the staff and all the public defenders. It's not, they'll never tell you, it's, you know, clients can have difficulties. It's how others in the criminal justice treat them. It's how they're treated by, you know, judges and by other personnel. And if they're treated well, it's important. It's important to be treated well. It's important to be treated with dignity and respect. And I don't care if you're the lawyer or if you're the client that has just been charged with a very serious homicide. Dignity and respect is very important to everybody in that criminal justice system.
I'm going to bring this full circle. We'll take some audience questions in a moment. Bring it full circle. At the beginning of this conversation, we talked about your dad just a little bit, but and on a personal note here, your family, and I'm talking most specifically in this case about your mom and your dad, have really given a lot in terms of trying to make things better. And I'm just not going to talk politics here, but talk about their service and their belief in this state and the people of this state. What did you learn from your mom? What did you learn from your dad? What was the big takeaway for you?
Just the incredible importance of public service, the incredible importance of giving back. I have never had either of my parents say, you know, money should be a priority. In fact, I can't imagine either of them saying that. Well, maybe after some of my student loans, they would have said that. But really, it was about what you can do for others. We grew up in a small town, rural Wisconsin, Elroy, and it was always about your community and what you could help the next person. It wasn't, well, you don't want to help that one. That one's gotten into trouble. I mean, good Lord, everybody was in trouble at one point in time or another. I think they were always about you're no better than anybody else, so never ever forget that. And they've taken, you know, my mom, as I mentioned, had breast cancer, and she was a teacher, a public school teacher, and she decided at that point she had a platform. She's like, rural health especially, but women's health was important. Women's health is family health. And she said, I have a voice and I have to use my voice. My mom is not a public person. This is not someone who likes to be on a stage and giving speeches, but she put that aside and said, I have something more to give. I have something that I need to give back, and now my sister does this work with her. So it's kind of who we were. It's how my parents grew up in their families, and it was always, there wasn't, I don't think to them really a higher calling.
Expected.
Yeah, it was what it was expected of us, that you had best be ready to give back to the people around you. And I think it was always, let me tell you, they made sure we knew you were as good as everybody else, but you were not any better. So don't forget that. So you be ready to help the next person. So and that's just how it was just how we lived. I mean, it was just how we existed.
We've got about 15 minutes left. Let's take some audience questions. If you're in the seating bowl, press down on that black device in front of you. Keep your finger down on that. We'll be able to hear your questions. If you're seated in the back, Eric has a microphone. He will hold the microphone for you. We ask that you keep your questions brief so we can get to as many as possible, and we always give preference to law school students. So if there are a few in the room and they have a question for Kelli Thompson, they can fire away. So raise your hand and we'll get to some questions. I'm going to start with this gentleman in the blue sweater right there. Right there. Yes. Go ahead. Just, yeah, you're good.
Thank you. My cousin's husband was in the DA's office in Hennepin County, and I asked him one time about his caseload, and he said if I was a private attorney, I could get sued. Is that in fact a real problem as far as overburdening your attorneys to the extent that their other side of the room has got more resources than they do?
Our attorneys are required to take hundreds of cases, and that's just part of it. They have a workload. They do intake things that are, but intake courts, bail hearings on top of just their cases. So the workload is significant. The resources are limited, though we have resources, so we're very fortunate. But that is certainly one of the reasons that we lose attorneys, is because to keep up with that workload is significant. And that's why I think so many of our attorneys this becomes a way of life for them. It's not something you could do on a Monday through Friday 8 till 5. You wouldn't be able to do the work. But, we do whatever we can internally to help provide that support. And it's another why the public defender's office and the DA's office, I'm sure too, is not the job for everyone. There's no doubt about it. You are setting aside a lot of other things that you can do or that you might want to do because, again, the workload is, I think the ABA, this was years ago, so who knows what it is now. It's certainly gone up, 125% of what the ABA would recommend. And that was, years ago. And so the short answer is it's significant.
Mm-hmm. Other questions?
doubt.
Yep, over here. Yes, sir.
Let me preface my question by saying, Ms. Thompson, we thank you for the work that you're doing, and we also thank you for being an influence to your dad changing his opinion in terms of corrections. My question to you is that I work for an organization, Project Return, which has been around
sure.
for nearly 39 years, and on last Thursday, I visited Red Granite Correctional Institution, talking to men about the services of Project Return, but also at this resource fair was many employers in the area who are looking for individuals and are giving men and of course women second chances to enter the workforce after incarceration. My question to you is in reference to crimeless revocation, because a lot of the men that I spoke to, and this is about at least 3 or 4 dozen men who will be coming home within a 6 to 18 month period. Many of the men that I spoke with last Thursday came back to prison, not for a new crime, but because of crimeless revocation. What, if anything, and I know that funding has been an issue that we spoke about this morning, but what, if anything, the Public Defender Office can do on the front end in assisting these men who are going through, for better use of phrase, kangaroo courts in order to, and being sent back to prison for not committing another crime?
So the question was regarding crimeless revocations, which are basically technical violations. So you're on some type of supervision and you pick up you quit seeing your agent for whatever reason, or you've had a substance abuse issue and you might have a dirty screen or something like that. But anyway, and then you go through a revocation process. So we represent in the revocation process. The problem becomes oftentimes because, again, the bar is set much lower, as you know. Individuals will oftentimes waive their right to a revocation hearing, and they just go ahead and do the time that's on paper for them to do. The issue it's exactly what you're talking about. It's that once you're in the system, it's so hard to get out of the system. And so what we're doing is Secretary Carr, he's talked about this as a priority. We're working with Department of Corrections, talking about the technical rule violations and what can happen, because a lot of times, so if I'm on probation in Milwaukee. My job is out in Waukesha, but I have to come down to my agent's office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't have a car, I don't have a driver's license. You know, a lot of these individuals we're also picking up because they're driving without their license because the fines are so high, they can't get their license back. So it's the revolving door again. And we see this over and over and over, just a significant number of individuals that continue to come back into the system because of these revocations. And again, that comes back to the length of time. I think, you know, there's one school of thought that says, well, if I give someone a lot of time on probation, they have that support. They have someone that's looking over their shoulder saying, are you getting this? Are you getting this? We all screw up. We all make mistakes. And 7, 8, 10, 12 years on extended supervision or some type of probation is a long time for someone to keep doing what if this is what you feel that they're doing. Again, it comes down to resources. If I'm an agent and I have a number of individuals on my list, but very few resources. I mean, thank God for organizations like Project Return, because that's where you're turning to, are the community organizations to say, what can we do to help these individuals? Because the revolving door of back on these technical violations or the low-end crime violations, the rule violations, they're a significant issue, and the numbers are frightening in how many people, the recidivism that we're seeing back and forth. And it's so hard. People get out into the community, they just get themselves settled, things are going well, they get that job, their kids are back at home, and then they, you know, do something that they're not supposed to drive, or, you know, whatever it could be, and then they're back in the system again, and it's a constant struggle.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Let me go back up here. This gentleman right here, wait for the microphone.
Thank you. You had mentioned earlier just the issue of not having a lot of representation in the rural counties. Does Wisconsin have a program to help forgiveness of student loans if they work for a public agency, perhaps then working up in those particular areas? I know other states have similar. Does Wisconsin have something like that?
There's a national, he's asking about loan forgiveness programs that are out there, and that is a significant issue, debt. Undergrad coupled with law school debt. I'm amazed at the number of individuals that come in that will have $150,000 in debt from undergrad and law school. So it's a significant amount of money. There are loan forgiveness debts. They're national, that people can work a certain number of years and then they can apply to have a certain amount. We've had a couple that have had some success, but very few. But the program is out there, and it's a national program that they can take part in.
Mm-hmm. Other questions? Yes, I'll come back here.
A couple weeks ago, when we saw Chisholm here, and he spoke about working with prosecutors from other states about the issue of providing resources before going to court and that. And you kind of mentioned that too. Regardless of resources or money, what type of things, like not description of the whole thing, but what type of things would you like to see, or do you talk to him about that? Because that sounded like he just was meeting with other prosecutors.
He's actually working with our office as well. So, and Tom Reed, who's in our office, manages our Milwaukee office along with Paige Stadler and Bridget Krause. So they work very closely with them. And a lot of those are the diversion programs. So there are individuals who are involved in our criminal justice system that if we can get them really early, we maybe can keep them away from the criminal justice system. Again, it could be what we would consider low-end crimes. It could be people that have had circumstances that, but for these circumstances, if we get them early enough, we can keep them from ever entering the criminal justice system. So Milwaukee has been working pretty significantly on keeping people with these deferred prosecution or diversion programs so that we don't even see them in the criminal justice system. Another area that we work on are treatment courts. So we have these problem-solving courts. Wisconsin has over 60 problem-solving courts throughout the state, which is fantastic. But these are people that are, because of a certain issue that they may have, it could be alcohol or drug issues, are diverted into a certain court so that they can get the resources that they need early on to perhaps have some success and have that support network that we can keep them from sitting in a jail cell or sitting in a prison. And these programs are wonderful, but they're small programs. I mean, that's why, they can only do so much. Long term, they'll be fantastic. And I think have a lot of success, but in the, at the time, they can only hit a few people at a time. And so there are still a lot of people going through the regular criminal justice system.
Is a person prosecuted or charged?
In some and in some they're not. So you could do something even basically you could say, here's an agreement. We all agree that this happened, whatever it may be. And but if you stay on your medications, if you do this, and you can come back, you're going to be supervised or reviewed or looked at by a certain organization. And if you come back in a year or 2 years and you're doing great, we're just going to be done. Others, they're like, no, we need court action. We need a judge involved. So they go before the judge and they say, Judge, all sides agree, including the client, including the individual, this happened. But we're hoping if they can go through all these 3 things or these 5 things or these 10 things, whatever it may be, and we provide them with some of that support, in the end, this case will be dismissed. So there are different, and same with problem solving or the treatment court. Some people are sitting in custody waiting for those. Some people it's while they're out of custody. Oftentimes those people have already been charged with a crime.
If you can keep it brief here, and then we'll wrap things up. Yes.
First, I think you should recognize Tom Reed, who's our public defender of
Right
Milwaukee
there.
County. And I think it would be great if he was in the visitor seat in a couple of weeks and tell everybody what's going on in Milwaukee County. But my question is this.
There you go, Tom.
Tom, myself, and Reverend Elwanger, we were at a meeting last week for the mental health subcommittee meeting for the Justice Council in the county, and we heard that WellPath, who is providing the health and mental health care in our incarceration system, is releasing people without housing, which is in violation of the statute. And on top of that, we can't keep a person in prison for 1 extra day without a judge's order. How are we going to solve this problem? And this housing problem is not just for formerly incarcerated people, but it affects our education system and everything else. So I'd like to hear what's going on just about this problem. Is a huge suit going to wake up the legislature?
It's a significant issue. And it's not just in Milwaukee. We're seeing this in a number of the urban areas, and even outside of the urban areas. It does obviously impact our clients in the criminal justice system, but as you've mentioned, obviously we know it's impacting, and we can just go outside the door here. We know that it's impacting a significant number of people. It's coming together. It's legislative, but it's also at the local level. It's policymakers sitting down and saying affordable housing is one of the number 1 issues that people that people need. There's no doubt about it. Affordable housing that is appropriate housing. And so, we have this issue with the Public Defender's Office statewide. And again, obviously it impacts some of our clients in a more dire way than others that it'll have to be a whole nother session
Absolutely.
to get into. But again, it's everybody coming to the table and saying we need to, it has to be a priority. Now, I will say there have been some legislative committees that are focusing on homelessness, and I think because it is an issue that people are hearing from their constituents. If it's important to you as a constituent, that has to get up to the legislature, because then it becomes a priority for them. I mean, and that's honestly what happened with the issues in the Public Defender's Office. When it becomes this has to matter to people. It has to matter. It has to matter here, and then you have to use your voice and make it matter out there. If we like certain things that are going on, and we like having a strong public defense system, and you feel there are resources that need to be had in the community, people the policymakers need to hear that. If we sit back quietly and just slap each other on the back and say, yeah, let's work on this, they don't hear that and things do not get done. So your voice matters. I can say that over and over. Your voice matters, and it matters to the people up at the Capitol.
I still think politics. I mean, I'm still thinking that's what I'm thinking when I listen to you.
No.
Before
Tom Reed. We'll announce Tom Reed running for office very soon.
Before we go, I'll ask you to just briefly take a few mental notes. So we've got a busy stretch coming up here at the Lubar Center. I want to make you aware of that. On Thursday, another On the Issues event. This one will feature the head of the Bradley Foundation, Rick Graber, also the former Czech ambassador, former head of the state Republican Party. Also, next week, Monday, we've got a conference where we will release our first national poll. It will look at public attitudes towards the U.S. Supreme Court. On Tuesday, another On the Issues event, still some seating available for that. Carl Holtz. He is the chief Washington correspondent for the New York Times, will be here. He's written a book called Confirmation Bias, which looks at that period of time from the death of Justice Scalia to the confirmation hearings for Justice Kavanaugh. So Carl Holtz will be here on Tuesday. There is still some seating available on that. And the same is true on Wednesday when we release our next statewide Marquette University Law School poll. So busy stretch. We hope that perhaps you can join us for some of those events. Again, as I say at all of these On the Issues get-togethers, we greatly appreciate your interest, your attention, and most of all, we are grateful today for Kelli Thompson for spending this hour with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.